Have you ever noticed that people have always loved a good conspiracy theory? I used to think they were mostly a modern obsession, but the deeper I looked into the ancient world, the more I realised that rumours, secret plots and hidden agendas have been around for thousands of years. Some of these stories are so unbelievable that they almost sound made up, but they're all rooted in history. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm diving into three fascinating conspiracy theories from the ancient world. We'll look at a wave of hysteria that swept through classical Athens, an alleged plot inside the court of Alexander the Great, and a campaign against a mysterious Persian religious cult. But before I get into those stories, I want to share a quick announcement with you. I've recently launched two brand new YouTube channels to go alongside the videos I make here. The first one is called Scenic Routes to the Past. On Scenic Routes to the Past, I take you with me as I travel to incredible historical locations. Unlike this channel, it isn't limited to ancient history, so I'll be exploring a much wider range of fascinating places. The first two videos are already available, and they follow my search for a long-forgotten railroad hidden deep in the Alaskan wilderness. That's where I upload episodes of my podcast, where I get the chance to sit down and talk with some of the most interesting historians working today. You'll also find Q&A videos, live streams, and plenty of other content that doesn't quite fit here on the main channel. If you have a moment, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to both of my new channels. Your support truly means a lot, and it helps me keep creating more history content for you. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into the world of ancient conspiracy theories. What makes a conspiracy theory so powerful? I've always found it fascinating that it doesn't have to be true or even completely false to spread like wildfire. Once people start filling in the blanks with suspicion, the story can take on a life of its own. A conspiracy theory exists in that uncertain space between fact and suspicion. People argue over it, believe it, reject it, and sometimes even become obsessed with it. It can eventually be exposed as completely false, or it might turn out to contain a grain of truth. But long before there's any real proof, it develops a life of its own, growing through rumours, speculation, and the opinions of the people repeating it. Ancient history is filled with conspiracies in the literal sense, organised plots aimed at bringing down those in power. Some of the best known examples include the Catilinarian conspiracy, the failed attempt to overthrow the Roman Republic that Cicero helped stop. Then there was the Pisonian conspiracy, which sought to remove Emperor Nero from power. Another famous case is the Barbarian conspiracy, an apparently coordinated assault on Roman Britain carried out by the Picts, Saxons and Irish. Actual conspiracy theories, though, are much less common in the ancient sources, at least in the way we usually think of them today. I'm talking about the belief that a hidden group was secretly pulling the strings behind everything happening in public. Of course, people have always speculated about those in power. Ever since the earliest civilizations, rumours have surrounded kings, emperors and political leaders, with whispers that trusted advisors, family members or influential courtiers were really making the decisions behind the scenes. But claims that an entire political system had been secretly hijacked usually appeared only when society was under intense pressure. During moments of fear, uncertainty and crisis, those ideas became much easier to believe. One of the earliest and most remarkable examples comes from classical Athens in an episode known as the Affair of the Herms. Have you ever seen something that looked like a simple act of vandalism, only to watch people treat it as the beginning of something much bigger? That's exactly what happened in ancient Athens, where one strange night sent an entire city spiralling into fear and suspicion. The Affair of the Herms is one of the best documented conspiracy theories from the ancient world. Athens, as you probably know, was famous for its democracy, where a large portion of the city's citizens took an active role in government. Because people were so directly involved in politics, and because public figures were constantly mocked and criticised in works like the comedies of Aristophanes, the lives, ambitions and scandals of leading politicians became everyday topics of conversation. Among all those politicians, none attracted more attention than Alcibiades. He was brilliant, charismatic, and depending on who you asked, completely without scruples. Coming from the same distinguished family that had produced Pericles, Alcibiades built his reputation by pushing for an aggressive policy against Sparta and its allies. People admired him for his powerful speeches before the Athenian assembly, and he also knew exactly how to put himself in the spotlight. One famous example was when he entered an astonishing 7 lavishly funded chariots into the Olympic races, a spectacular display of wealth and ambition. At the same time, though, his reckless private life made many Athenians deeply suspicious of him, setting the stage for what would soon become the Affair of the Herms. Herms were small stone monuments placed at crossroads and beside doorways throughout the city. Each one consisted of a simple stone pillar topped with the head of a god and decorated with a large erect phallus. Then in the spring of 415 BC, just as the Athenian government, encouraged by Alcibiades, was preparing to send a massive fleet to conquer Sicily, something extraordinary happened. During a single night, nearly every herm in Athens was found with its nose and phallus deliberately smashed off. Today, that might sound like nothing more than an elaborate prank, but for the people of Athens, it was anything but harmless. These monuments represented the gods themselves, and damaging them was considered a serious act of sacrilege. The timing only made things worse. With the Sicilian expedition about to begin, many Athenians saw the widespread mutilation of the herms as a terrifying omen. Before long, rumours spread across the city that this wasn't random vandalism at all. People began to believe a secret group had carried out the attack as part of a hidden plot to overthrow the Athenian government. Before we get back to the story, let me take a quick break to tell you about today's sponsor. And unlike the conspiracy theories we've been talking about, this one is completely straightforward. Today's video is sponsored by Tige Hanley, a skincare brand made specifically for men. Their products are affordable, easy to use, and as someone who spends a lot of time making YouTube videos and deals with pretty dry skin, I've found them genuinely helpful in my daily routine. If you're not sure where to start, I'd recommend the Level 1 system. It comes with a daily face wash, an exfoliating scrub that you use twice a week, plus both a morning and an evening moisturizer, making it a simple routine that's easy to stick with. Every box also includes a helpful instruction card so you know exactly how and when to use each product and can get the best results from your skincare routine. And you don't have to rely only on what I'm saying. Tige Hanley has earned more than 5,000 five-star reviews from satisfied customers on its website, with people from around the world sharing their positive experiences. If you'd like to give it a try yourself, you can sign up for Tige Hanley and enjoy discounts on every order, customize your subscription boxes, and take advantage of several other member benefits. As a special offer for viewers of this channel, just click the link in the description. You'll receive 30% off your first box, along with a free gift. It's a great opportunity to try the products for yourself, so check out the link below and get started today. Have you ever noticed how quickly fear can turn suspicion into certainty? Once people become convinced there's a hidden plot, every new rumour starts looking like proof, even when the evidence doesn't really support it. Now, back to classical Athens. As the official investigation moved forward, more information began to surface. It turned out that shortly before the herms had been mutilated, a group of young men had vandalized other religious statues and even staged a mock version of the Eleusinian Mysteries, the most sacred religious ceremony in Athens. According to the rumours, Alcibiades had been one of the men involved. Before long, whispers spread throughout the city that Alcibiades hadn't just taken part in mocking the sacred mysteries. People also began claiming that he was responsible for the destruction of the herms, and that these acts of sacrilege were all part of a larger plan to bring down Athenian democracy. At the very moment these accusations were gaining momentum, Alcibiades was serving as one of the commanders of the Sicilian expedition. That meant he had to leave Athens before he ever had the chance to defend himself or answer the growing accusations. With Alcibiades gone, the story only became bigger. More and more people started connecting the mutilation of the herms with the mockery of the Eleusinian Mysteries, convincing themselves that an aristocratic conspiracy was secretly working to replace the government. Then another event poured fuel on the fire. When reports arrived that a small Spartan force had been seen nearby, many Athenians immediately assumed the soldiers had been invited by the supposed conspirators. Fear quickly turned into action. Authorities began making arrests, armed patrols were stationed throughout the centre of the city, and eventually Alcibiades himself was ordered to return to Athens to stand trial for the crimes he was accused of committing. It's certainly possible that Alcibiades really did participate in mocking the Eleusinian Mysteries alongside his friends. It's also not impossible that he knew some of the men responsible for damaging the herms. But there's no convincing reason to believe he was actually trying to overthrow the democratic government. The threat of an aristocratic coup was very real. In fact, Athens would experience 2 such coups within the decade following the Sicilian expedition. Even so, Alcibiades had very little to gain by overthrowing the very government that had just entrusted him with one of its most important military commands. Looking at the evidence today, it seems far more likely that Alcibiades wasn't the mastermind behind a secret revolution at all. Instead, he became the target of a conspiracy theory that grew larger with every passing rumour until suspicion itself began to outweigh the facts. And as you'll see, he certainly wasn't the last powerful figure in the ancient world to find himself trapped in exactly that kind of story. What happens when the most powerful man on earth dies without a clear explanation? I found that people rarely accept a simple answer in moments like that. Instead, rumours spread, suspects appear, and before long, an entire conspiracy begins to take shape. Unlike democratic leaders such as Alcibiades, ancient monarchs stood at the centre of both public attention and public suspicion. No rulers illustrate this better than the Roman emperors, whose lives are filled with stories of secret plots, scandals, and shocking behaviour. Whenever an emperor died under suspicious circumstances, conspiracy theories were almost guaranteed to follow. But to me, one of the most fascinating conspiracy theories from the ancient world surrounds the death of Alexander the Great. Alexander died in Babylon on June 10th, 323 BC, when he was just 32 years old. According to the most reliable ancient biographers, he became ill about 10 days earlier, either during or shortly after a banquet where plenty of wine was flowing. At first it was only a fever, mild enough that Alexander ignored it while continuing to prepare for his planned invasion of Arabia. Over the next several days, though, his condition rapidly worsened. He grew so weak that he could no longer sit upright or even speak. Still burning with fever, he eventually slipped into a coma, and he never regained consciousness. Another version of the story adds a far more dramatic scene. In that account, Alexander was raising a large cup of wine during his final banquet when he suddenly cried out in intense pain. He collapsed immediately, his companions carried him away, and he remained in terrible agony until the coma finally overtook him. It didn't take long for people to begin asking whether Alexander had really died of natural causes. Almost immediately after his death, rumours started spreading that he had actually been poisoned. According to those stories, the man behind the plot was Antipater, Alexander's regent in Europe. The conspiracy claimed that Antipater arranged for his younger son, Aeolus, to secretly poison Alexander's wine using a deadly substance supposedly prepared by none other than the philosopher Aristotle. At first glance, Aristotle might seem like an unlikely suspect, but he did have reasons to resent Alexander. Years earlier, he had served as the king's tutor. When Alexander launched his campaign against Persia, Aristotle sent his own nephew, Callisthenes, to accompany the army and record its victories. Eventually, however, Alexander accused Callisthenes of treason and had him executed on what many believe were fabricated charges. Not surprisingly, that tragedy did nothing to improve Aristotle's feelings toward his former student. As the rumours continued to grow, they became even more extraordinary. According to the story, Aristotle had somehow obtained water from the legendary river Styx. The poison was said to be so powerful that it could dissolve any container except the hoof of a mule. Working together with Antipater, Antipater's son Cassander, and what was quite literally a mule carrying the deadly liquid, the poison supposedly made its way all the way to Babylon before ending up in Alexander's drinking cup. The tale of the Styx belongs much more to legend than history, and Aristotle's involvement is considered extremely unlikely. Even so, the idea that Alexander may have been poisoned has never been completely ruled out. Alexander's own mother, Olympias, either genuinely believed or at least publicly claimed that Antipater had arranged her son's murder. Acting on that belief, she ordered the execution of several men accused of taking part in the conspiracy. She even had the body of the alleged poisoner Aeolus dug up so his bones could be scattered as a final act of disgrace. The violence didn't end there. Cassander, who was both Antipater's son and Aeolus' brother, eventually took revenge by executing Olympias and leaving her body unburied. He also settled the score with the Athenian orator Hyperides, whose mistake had been suggesting that Aeolus deserved to be honoured for poisoning Alexander. After Cassander's agents captured Hyperides, his tongue was cut out, he was executed, and his body, like Olympias's, was left exposed for wild animals and birds. Of course, this long chain of accusations, executions, and revenge doesn't prove that Alexander was murdered. In fact, the most trustworthy ancient historians firmly rejected the poisoning story, treating it as a product of political rivalry and public suspicion rather than solid evidence. We'll probably never know exactly what caused Alexander's death, but based on the evidence that has survived malaria, made even worse by years of heavy drinking and countless old battle wounds, remains a much more convincing explanation than poison. Still, as history has shown time and again, the simplest explanation isn't always the one people choose to believe. What if one of the longest religious persecutions in the ancient world began because people believed a story that simply wasn't true? That's the unsettling part of this final chapter. A single conspiracy theory would end up shaping government policy for generations and changing countless lives. Not far from Babylon, more than 500 years after Alexander the Great's death, another conspiracy theory began to take shape. This one would prove to be the deadliest of them all. It started in a small village in Mesopotamia where a prophet named Mani began preaching a new faith. The religion founded by Mani is known today as Manichaeism. At its heart was the belief that the universe was locked in an endless struggle between the forces of light and darkness. To help ensure the ultimate victory of light, a select group known as the elect gave up all worldly possessions and dedicated their lives to sacred rituals meant to combat the powers of darkness. The rest of the faithful were known as the hearers. Their role was to support the elect through charity and material assistance. By doing so, they hoped that one day they would be reborn as members of the elect themselves and eventually escape what Mani described as the prison of the physical body. With the personal support of the Persian Shah, Mani travelled throughout the Persian Empire spreading his teachings. He presented his religion as the fulfillment and replacement of the teachings of Jesus, Zoroaster, and the Buddha. Before long, missionaries were carrying his message to India, across the steppes of Central Asia, and into the Roman Empire. One of Mani's closest followers, Ada, led the first mission into Roman territory. Communities of believers soon appeared in provinces such as Syria and Egypt. Armed with translations of Mani's writings and trained to debate philosophers and religious leaders, Manichaean missionaries attracted converts surprisingly quickly. Over time, small groups of followers appeared everywhere from Alexandria to Rome. Traditionally, the Romans were willing to tolerate many different religions as long as those faiths respected the existing political and social order. But whenever a movement appeared to encourage disloyalty or rebellion, the Roman government often responded with force. The persecution of Christians is the most famous example, although similar actions had taken place centuries earlier when the Roman Republic suppressed the cult of Bacchus for encouraging what it viewed as immoral behaviour. Then in the year 302, Emperor Diocletian received reports of disturbances linked to Manichaean preaching in the province of Africa. The more he learned about the movement, the more suspicious he became. Mani had once enjoyed the friendship and support of the Persian Shah, and Persia was Rome's greatest rival. To Diocletian and the advisors around him, that connection seemed impossible to ignore. They became convinced that Manichaeism wasn't simply a new religion. In their eyes, it was a carefully planned Persian scheme designed to weaken and ultimately overthrow the Roman Empire. Diocletian made his position unmistakably clear in an imperial decree. He declared that the Manichaeans were trying to corrupt the innocent, orderly and tranquil Roman people by spreading what he described as the damnable customs and perverse laws of the Persians, comparing the religion to the poison of a deadly serpent. The punishments were severe. Any Roman citizen who converted to Manichaeism faced execution. Government officials who supported the religion were condemned to hard labour in the mines. As for the Manichaean missionaries themselves, they were ordered to be burned alive on top of piles of their own sacred writings. In practice, those harsh orders were not always enforced. As the coming great persecution of the Christians would also demonstrate, many provincial governors had little enthusiasm for carrying out every imperial command. Because of that, most Manichaeans appear to have escaped the worst of the punishment. Even so, the campaign against them did not end. Throughout the 4th century and long afterward, Roman emperors continued issuing laws that stripped Manichaeans of their legal rights, declared them outlaws, and repeatedly sentenced them to death. As the Roman Empire gradually became Christian, the pressure only increased. Manichaeans were now condemned as dangerous heretics and enemies of the true faith. One of their most influential critics was St. Augustine, who had actually been a follower of Manichaeism before converting to Christianity. Along with many other Christian writers, he attacked what became known as the Persian heresy. Over time, increasingly brutal persecution forced the movement underground before eventually driving it almost entirely out of the empire. The irony is that Manichaeism was never a Persian conspiracy at all. It's true that Mani had briefly enjoyed support at the Persian court, but he ultimately died in prison. Long before Diocletian ever issued his decree, Mani's religion was already being persecuted inside Persia itself by the Zoroastrian priesthood. And yet the Roman campaign against the Manichaeans continued with occasional interruptions for more than 2 centuries. As church and state became more closely connected during the later Roman Empire, the persecution evolved into both a political policy and a religious mission. But when you trace it back to its beginning, it all started with something much simpler and much more dangerous, a conspiracy theory. If you enjoyed today's journey through some of history's most fascinating conspiracy theories, I've got plenty more content waiting for you. Be sure to check out my new travel channel where you can follow my adventures to incredible historical locations. One of the featured videos takes you along Alaska's remarkable Copper River, and there are many more journeys still to come. If you're interested in even more history discussions, interviews, and behind the scenes content, head over to my other channel, Told in Stone Footnotes. That's where you'll find my podcast, interactive videos, and plenty of additional content that expands on the topics we cover here. I'd also like to give another thank you to Tej Hanley for sponsoring today's video. If you'd like to learn more about their products or take advantage of the special offer, you'll find the link waiting for you in the description below. And if you'd like to support the channel while getting access to exclusive Told in Stone content, you can join me on Patreon. You may also enjoy my book Naked Statues, Fat Gladiators and War Elephants if you're looking for even more fascinating stories from the ancient world. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you in the next video.